Hi, this is Randy. Welcome to my channel. Glad to have you here today. Hope all is well with you. God's good to me. Today we're going to be talking about what would you sell your soul for? All right, what would you sell your soul for? Some people sell out pretty cheap. You know, the devil went to Georgia. He's looking for a soul to steal. He's in a bind. He's way behind, ready to make a deal. What do you take for your soul? We're going to talk about that today. I'm going to ask you real quick if you would subscribe to the channel. Give me a thumbs up. Make a comment if you would. It costs no money. Just takes a few seconds. Really help my channel out so I can get some help. Thank you so much. Commercial over. Let's move on. What would you take in exchange for your soul? Mark chapter 8 and verse 36 says, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?" What good does it do if you work yourself to death, do everything you can by hook or crook to make all the money you can, get all the toys you can get, and at the end of it, you go to hell? I'm not saying rich people are going to hell. The Lord said He's made the rich and the poor. All right? So I got nothing against anybody, on how much money they got or whatever. If you're a billionaire, happy for you. All right? There's no problem. But the point I'm making is some people will do anything to get what they want, and they don't care about their soul. And so we need to realize many people sell their soul for many different reasons, all right? I had a 25-year-old young lady that went to our church. She'd been a Christian for about a year. And she said, "Pastor, I'd like to talk to you about something." I said, "Okay." Well, sure enough. So she went in the office and we sat down. And I think I had my wife in there with me. Anyway, I said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "Well, I've been offered another job and I wanted to talk to you about it." Now, this was in around 1998, 1999. So we're not talking about today's money. We're talking about money from 27, 28 years ago, okay? So you can put this in perspective when I give you these numbers. I asked her, what do you want to talk about? She said, "I've been offered another job and I'm thinking about taking it. I'd really like to have it." I said, "Okay, then what do you need prayer about? About which job or what?" She said, "Well, I make $11 an hour and the new job pays $16 an hour. So I would make $5 an hour more." I said, "Well, what about the benefits? I know where you work at. You had mentioned to me you have health insurance." She said, "Yeah, I have health insurance. I have paid holidays. I have sick pay, and I also have vacation. And the new job's pretty close to the same. I think one was they give you a week after 1 year and 2 after 3 years. And the other one was maybe 2 after 5. But after 10, they both got paid 3 weeks or something like that. They were very similar in benefits." I said, "If the benefits are about the same, you're not going to lose your health insurance. You're going to have sick days and all that, and you're going to make $5 an hour more. It's kind of a no-brainer, isn't it?" And she said, "Well, I forgot to tell you. I wanted to see what you thought." I said, "Okay, tell me." She said, "Well," I said, "what's the hook?" She said, "I have to work every Sunday and every Thursday." We had church on Thursday night, not Wednesday night. The reason I did at that time was I was in charge of a district, and there was like 10 or 12 churches in my district, maybe 8, something like that. I don't remember, so many years ago, but something like that. And so if they had a problem at their church, they needed me, I'd go down there on a Wednesday night when they had church, and I addressed the issue. So I had my church on Thursday night so I could take care of the other business if it needed to be done. So she said, "I work Thursday through Monday." And I said, "Oh, well then you wouldn't be at church Thursday nor Sunday." She said, "No, I'd be out every Thursday and Sunday. I wouldn't be coming no more." And I said, "Well, how do you feel about that?" And she said, "Well, I'm kind of struggling with it." And I said, "Okay." And she goes, "What do you think?" I said, "Well, my thought is that if you take that job and you've only been a Christian for about a year and you're no longer going to come to church, yeah, you can watch a Christian program on TV. Back then, we didn't have everything we have on the internet like we have today. We had the internet, so to speak, but nothing like it is today. And then most churches sold cassette tapes of their services. She said, I could listen to cassette tapes and I could look at some church service on TV. And I said, okay. I said, but that's not being around the people in church and being around the other brothers and sisters. And she said, well, yeah, I know, and that's what I'm struggling with. So I told her, you want my honest opinion? She said, yeah. I said, I'd stay where I'm at and take the $11 an hour. Benefits are about the same. You're going to make $5 an hour less, but you're already making 11. You've kind of got used to it, and maybe there's room for advancement where you're at, but I don't want to see you lose your soul. I don't want to see you go back to not being a child of God, not going to church no more, not serving the Lord. And she said, I was afraid you'd say that. She goes, I really want that job. And I said, well, it sounds like to me you've already got your mind made up. She said, well, I just wanted to see what you said. So you were hoping I'd give my blessing until you take the $5 more an hour? Did you think I'd say, well, just keep paying your tithes into the church and you can not come and we'll give you cassette tapes and all that? So I'm not going to do that. I'm concerned more about you than I am the almighty dollar. I said, I think it's a bad deal to take a job where you can never go to church, especially when you've only been a Christian for a year. You're not founded, you're not stable. And she said, well, I really want that job. I said, okay, well then you do what you want to do. Do you want me to pray with you now? She said, would you? So I prayed for her. And I said, Lord, convict her heart. Let her know which way to go. If she should take the new job or she should stay where she's at, Lord, reveal it to her. Let her feel it in her spirit and let her listen to the voice of the Spirit and let her move in the way you wanted her to move. And I prayed for her. I said, let me know what you decide to do. She said, I will. And about 2 days later, maybe 3, I don't remember, it was something like that, she called me and said, I took that job. I said, okay. I said, well, we'll be missing you, not having you in church. She said, I know, but I'm still going to try to carry on with the Lord. I'll still read my Bible. I'm going to try to do this. And I said, okay. So about 2 years later, I ran into her at Walmart in the evening one night, and she come around the corner, and I was getting ready to get close to the corner, and she saw me. She didn't try to avoid me, didn't run away. She pushed her car right up to me and ran up to me and gave me a hug. Said, it's good to see you, Pastor. I said, it's really good to see you. I haven't seen you in 2 years. And she looked quite a bit different in that 2-year period. Not worse, I don't mean that, but I meant I almost didn't recognize her at first. She changed her hairstyle and stuff like that. And so, plus she was wearing work clothes. And I said, how are you doing? She said, oh, pretty good. I said, how do you like your job? She said, oh, I love it. It's really good money, and I got to move up to another position just last week, and I get 18 an hour instead of 16. I said, well, that's great. I said, how are you doing with the Lord? And she dropped her head. Just silence. And I said, well, how are you doing with the Lord? She said, I don't read my Bible no more. And of course, I don't go to church. And then she started telling me some things she was starting to dabble in. And she said, I feel so guilty. And she started to tear up. And I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that. I said, it's never too late to change. I said, why don't you look for a different job? Maybe you can find something that pays you 14 or 15 or, whatever an hour and give you about the same benefits, and you could have normal hours and not have to work that kind of schedule. I love my job and I love the money, and I've got room for more advancement to make more money. And she goes, I've got overtime and I get time and a half. She said, I'm making the best money I've ever made. I said, well, I hope that it's all worth it, because you kind of turn your back on God and you tell me you're really not happy spiritually or mentally, but you're happy with the paycheck and the job. She says, that's about it. I said, well, I'll be praying for you. And I patted her on her shoulder and told her I'd pray for her. And I told her I loved her and that we missed her, and I sure wish that she could get back into church, even if it wasn't our church, somewhere. And so she walked off, and I thought all the way home, and I told my wife when I got home, I ran into her and what happened. She goes, Isn't that a shame? I said, sure is. I said, she was doing so good for the Lord and really growing, and now she doesn't go to church. She doesn't read her Bible, and she's starting to dabble in a couple things. I said, not horrible sin. I'm not implying that, but things that would not lead her down a good path, in my opinion. All right, and so I told my wife, I said, I'm going to pray for her tonight. I'm going to ask church to pray for her, but I'm not going to tell them who it is. I'm going to just tell them there's a young lady that needs prayer because I don't want her to get hurt or anything like that. But I'm going to ask the church to pray and unknown prayer for someone, and I'm not even going to tell them it's a male or female. They don't need to know that. And so I did, and we prayed for her. I never saw her again. I've never spoken to her since then. I don't know if she still works there, if she's even in the area. But all I know is she made a choice. And she knew what it was going to be when she was asking me. She was hoping that I would say, yeah, you're doing the right thing. What am I telling you? I'm telling you, why don't you say, what would you sell your soul for $5 an hour? Is that what you would do? I'm just asking you. Are you the person that would sell your soul for $5 an hour? Some people sell their soul for less than that. For what does it profit a man if he gain the whole world and forfeit his own soul? Is there a price you would take for your soul? You have a wonderful day. Thanks for your time, this time. Till next time, old Rev May signing off. Have a wonderful day.